Well, hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. How's your Monday? Yeah, mine too. It's like, is it Friday yet? No, bro, it's still Monday. We haven't even got out of Monday yet. I feel you. I feel you. We're not having it as bad as our friends over at Tesla showrooms around the country. They seem to be the latest target. It's so interesting to see how this man in the public consciousness, Elon Musk, has turned from the greatest thing in the world into Lex Luthor. And of course, it's all over politics, but here to make some sense of it, my first guest, Raven Harrison's back on the James Show. Hey, Raven, how's it going?
Hey, James. Happy Monday.
Did you raid any Tesla showrooms over the weekend?
No, but we have a Tesla. So I invite the crazy. Bring it. It's a great car. We love it.
See, don't you find it interesting, though, that for, I don't know, like the first decade, we all knew this guy's name. He was associated with environmentalism and global warming and electric cars. And, Solar City was even part of his profile. And he was adored by the same people who think he's literally Hitler now.
Well, correct. And that just goes to show you the scathing hypocrisy of what they talk about. All the people, all that green new stuff went out the window as soon as they couldn't control his politics. And it was the same thing with President Trump. When he was a Democrat, everybody loved him. Everybody wanted to be at his parties. Everybody wanted to be close to him. Everybody wanted a favor from him. And what did Barack Obama say? The American dream was to be Donald Trump. And then the second he said, well, I don't really like how this is going. I'm going in as a Republican. All of a sudden he became the Antichrist overnight.
Well, you could say that about Joe Rogan, too. He went through the same thing, and he didn't actively seek to leave Team Blue and come to Team Red. It's almost as if he was pushed. He
was canceled. And that's the problem with the Democrats. They claim to be protecting democracy, but they're going to cancel anybody who doesn't think like them and act like them. We're all for democracy as long as we agree with it. We're all for free speech, as long as we can control it. And who says what? And we're all for rights and freedoms as long as, they apply to us and not you. I mean, they have been a walking hypocrisy for a while, but now we're starting to see it. And if they think they're going to win people back, has that ever worked, James, in the history of ever? Has anybody ever gone, you know what? I was thinking about leaving the Democrats, but because they're going to call me names and hurt my feelings, I think I'll stay. I mean, they are ridiculous.
Well, Raven, I think that's why a lot of people stick around, especially if you live in one of these hyper blue bubbles. Like if you live within walking distance of this studio, probably 90% of your friends are Team Blue, and you will be ostracized. You will be called names. And I think that does work on a lot of people. They don't want to lose all their friends. They don't want to be seen as a literal Hitler by people that they admire and hang out with or related to or their coworkers.
Well, if they're that easy, then I would submit that you don't really have friends, okay? You have opportunists, and it takes courage to be disliked. It really does. I mean, look at what Elon's mom is getting. I just saw on X, she just got the hate, how do you feel knowing you raised the biggest POS in history? And I'm like, it's crazy where people are. They're so consumed with hate that this is it.
Okay. Couple of juxtapositions I think that you'll appreciate. Number one, Elon Musk. He's the biggest POS ever. The guy who made electric cars, the only person who's made electric cars profitable, sending rockets into space. He's boring holes. He's got the Starlink. He's doing like 10 awesome things, Neuralink. But George Floyd's a hero. That's a beautiful juxtaposition.
That's how they work. And again, I think President Trump said it perfectly in the State of the Union. He said, there's nothing you can do to make these people happy. Literally, Elizabeth Warren, I think about 8 years ago, was screaming about how it's important to have accountability.
Just
and
happens.
Now, Pocahontas, is accountability. And now that we're investigating how she's worth $100 million, how her net worth ballooned from $67 million to $100 million. Now, all of a sudden, anybody who tries to look into that is a racist and is a bully. And I mean, it's just unbelievable watching them rally. We didn't elect Elon. Well, nobody elected Gates. Nobody elected Soros. Nobody elected Fauci. Nobody elected all these other people who have had such say either, but they didn't have a problem then. So again, this is the typical hypocrisy of the left. Do as I say, not as I do. Rules for thee, but not for me. And people are fed up with it, and they're digging that hole deeper every day, James.
All right, so let's walk down the next step, because I'm going to ask you what I'm about to ask callers for the next segment, the people listening right now. So if all these people are attacking Elon Musk or Tesla because they have a beef with Elon Musk politically, that means they are using violence, property damage, intimidation, coercion for a political cause. That's literally the definition of terrorism. So are these people, by definition, domestic terrorists?
Yes. You know me, James. I don't mince my words. And again, that's what, you have the right to peacefully protest. But again, these people are blocking. I have seen video. And again, Democrats are masters of don't believe what you see with your own eyes. I saw people having their windows, trying to break the windows of a cyber truck that was driving, jumping on top of people's electric cars. And, the protest to me was it Sheryl Crow, who wanted to spectacularly show that she was donating, giving her Tesla away. I don't want it anymore. And she gave it to NPR, which is already publicly funded. And she already paid for it.
That's funny.
So
the better one was the AOC turned in her Tesla and went and got a Volkswagen. It's like, AOC.
The Hitler mobile.
Yeah, right. You
Exactly.
know who started Volkswagen, right?
Is Hitler.
Yeah.
And I mean, these people are just so crazy. But if they didn't have a double standard, they wouldn't have any at all. And that's where we just have to kind of ride through it. We sat through 4 years of a guy with dementia who, didn't know where he was, and them protecting this as normal. And now they're having their meltdown, and it's glorious.
Tell me how your campaign's going.
Campaign is going great. We have our first big kickoff this Thursday, and it's going to be spectacular. But patriots, we need them to write checks. James, we got to get there at Raven Harrison for Congress. If you want a better government, then you need to be bought by we the people and not the lobbyists.
When do we write checks anymore? Just go on your phone and do a couple thumb pushes and squeeze off a few bucks for good old Raven.
I'm that old. I'm check old.
Right.
So, yes.
Literally, when was the last time you wrote a check?
Me personally,
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, I just bought a house.
Oh, okay. Well, that counts. What about before that? Because I'm trying to think of when the last time I wrote a check was, and I really can't remember. I think I had to write one like
Before that,
3 years
I'd be
ago.
hard pressed to find it, but I did recently because they only wanted the deposit in check form, so we keep one dusted off just in case.
Man, that just accidentally blew my mind. When was the last time you wrote a check? 800-288-9. No, you don't have to do that. I want to ask the question saying, thank you, Raven. I want to ask the same questions I was asking Raven. Tesla showrooms being targeted nationwide. This is violence, intimidation, property damage for a political cause. Doesn't that are these people terrorists? Are they domestic terrorists? Because if they are, that makes a whole another set of dominoes fall down. If these people were domestic terrorists, then should they be arrested and charged with domestic terrorism charges? Should they be sent to Guantanamo? The groups organizing, they're setting these up or funding them. Are these now terrorist organizations? Is Act Blue now akin to the Mexican cartels and Al Qaeda? I think this is a much bigger story than a lot of people are giving it credit for, and for obvious reasons here. But Tesla attacks, it's not just their showrooms. You've seen, if you've been scrolling through social media, you've probably seen this already. But if you're not terminally online like me, there's been a lot of people occupying Tesla showrooms, protesters going in there and chanting and singing, and we were playing some of that last week. But now that it's continued, there's an obvious pattern that implies some level of organization. There's some people who are supporting this, promoting this, getting people out. It's not people didn't just randomly all show up holding signs and singing the same song. There's a level of organization to this, and it looks people's right to do so. It's not their right to go damage property, or it's not their right to just go trespass and interrupt business. But up to that point, you have your own opinion. It disagrees with mine. That's fine until you start destroying property, until you go spray paint some random dude's Cybertruck just because you hate Elon Musk and he's literally Hitler. So we run into a few different problems here, just sort of culturally speaking, with this line of stories, because it's showrooms, it's people's private Cybertrucks are getting spray painted on and vandalized and whatnot. And if you go search through this pattern in the news, let's plug in some problems here. Number one, the definition of terrorism is violence or intimidation for a political cause. And so, I know that sounds really broad, but it kind of fits what's going on here. Okay, so if they are terrorists in nature, are we overusing that term? Okay, if this was people we politically agreed with, would we still use the term domestic terrorism? If this was people on Team Red, would we be so quick to label them domestic terrorists? Well, let's think about that. What has happened in the past when the opposite's gone down? When a group of Team Red supporters went and vandalized a business that was perceived as Team Blue, or real or perceived as Team Blue. I don't know. You got any examples of that? I can kind of think of a couple years ago when Bud Light ticked off a lot of people with a woke campaign. I did notice like Kid Rock and a few other people bought Bud Light and they shot their own can. So they're not vandalizing anyone else's property. They're not going into a showroom and interrupting business. They're not breaking the windows at the business. They didn't go to the nearest Bud Light distributor and start chucking rocks at the windows. But there's even a more perfect metaphor than this. That's what's so amazing about this story. It's for most of your life, most of his life. Elon Musk has been identified with the Democrats. He's been on Team Blue. In fact, it was just until 4 or 5 years ago that you even saw this new side of Elon Musk. The dark MAGA is what he became. But it was a slow transition that we all just saw move in slow motion in front of our eyes over the course of about the last decade. And so we actually know Tesla used to be perceived as a Team Blue company. So we don't even have to have the hypothetical. You already know. Garrett already knows. When Tesla was perceived as Team Blue, were they being received with politically motivated vandalism? No, they were not. So I don't know if we even have a comparison here. I don't even know if we can play the whataboutism game or the both sides game. Because in this case, there's not a both sides. There's a lot of other companies that are perceived as Team Blue, Team Right people. A bunch of gravy seals don't go show up and chucking rocks at them or spray painting their windows, do they? Or am I missing something here? Do I just have a hole in my memory? Am I not thinking of a good example? 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. I know a few of you people listen just to prove me wrong. This is your chance. What am I missing here? What is the right-wing equivalent of what we're seeing happening to Tesla? And also X. X went down for a little bit earlier today. They're saying it's a cyber attack. We don't know the motivation, but if that's politically motivated, same thing applies. For most of Twitter's existence, it wasn't owned by Elon Musk. It was owned by Jack Dorsey and a few other people. Was there ever a politically motivated cyber attack when it was perceived as a Team Blue platform? So now we're getting into some interesting territory here. We have some attacks that are politically motivated, and it meets the definition of terrorism. But I roll my eyes when we use that definition against these people. Why? Because the blue-haired sphere that's been convinced that Elon Musk is a Nazi is not the same thing as Al-Qaeda or Osama bin Laden. These people that are spray painting a Tesla aren't the same as the people who go blindfold a guy, make him kneel on the beach, and they saw off their head on camera and put it online just to show the world a lesson. It's not the same. We shouldn't be calling it the same. What we should do is kind of back down a little bit on calling each other domestic terrorists. And even though that if the roles were reversed, they would be calling you a domestic terrorist, that doesn't make it right to call them a domestic terrorist, because it's not. That definition of terrorism was intentionally made so vague as not to offend the delicate sensibilities of a big chunk of this country, that we made it too broad. Well, you know what we mean by terrorism. We don't mean protesters that get upset and set a dumpster on fire. We don't mean protesters that get upset and spray paint someone's car. We mean the people that saw off heads. We mean the people that bomb buildings. We mean the people that hijack planes. So these people, no, they shouldn't be arrested and charged with domestic terrorism. They should be charged with violence, intimidation, property damage, whatever the heck they're doing that's already illegal. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. For my next guest, Janice Spooner's coming back on, and I like to ask her about these headlines that affect your money. You're over at Great Plains Bank. You guys worried about the stock market freaking out today?
Good afternoon. Not worried about it. It doesn't surprise me to the news and what's been going on with the new presidency and administration, particularly tariffs and what's going on with small businesses and different countries that we are having to negotiate with.
Yeah, I like talking to a local bank every once in a while because you deal more with the people in our own backyard. Any changes you've noticed from tariffs?
Actually, yes. small businesses are really concerned about what's going on right now with the tariffs that are already implemented with China, as well as those pending coming online here probably on April 2nd. They, especially industries like textiles, for example, a wedding dress maker, fabricator, seller, designer here locally in DFW, they've had bridal gowns ordered for months, and now these new fabrics are already being charged extraordinary tariffs. Not that it's not uncommon from China in history, but still, their margins are crashing.
So, are you seeing them having problems finding replacements or alternate sources of fabric, or did they just have to eat the tariff whole?
Both. They're and should be looking for alternate methods and providers, vendors for that. And I coach that to small businesses right now before it continues on. Start looking for alternate means, but the impact is here, and it's unfortunately already impacting them.
Well, let's talk about the alternates. You say you help people find that. What does that look like? I've never coached a small business into finding alternate input sources.
I don't tell them where to find it. I tell them that they need to start looking and diversifying their suppliers. Look at locking in price contracts. Look to automate and reduce waste. Explore alternative materials. They have to start really looking for options because there's going to be inventory shortages.
Right. Well, I've also thought whichever country gets through this first, and then they're like, fine, we'll do the reciprocal tariffs, and they would become like the first backup plan to so many of these other countries that still have their inputs choked off into coming into the United States. So much of our manufacturing could just move to India pretty quick, and who cares if your iPhone is snapped together in China or India when you're over here in Texas?
Well, and they're going to have to look at different means. I understand we're trying to right a wrong or right a blind eye to our country and the taxes, and through these growing pains, there will be pain, there will be suffering, but we can't just sit still and not find alternate ways through innovation or otherwise to start saving that money before the other countries, if they do come online and increase tariffs. We've got to start doing that now. It's not the first time China has charged us these high tariff prices back in the trade wars of 2018, but still, we've forgotten about that, and we need to pivot quickly right now.
All right, Janice Spooner, at your bank, Great Plains Bank, you guys deal with a bunch of stuff that's not really public facing, the credit markets and whatnot. What are you guys talking about behind closed doors? Where do you think interest rates will be in like 6 months or a year from now? You think rates are going to go up or down?
Well, it's very fluid right now. Most of the conversations and those economists that I follow say rates are going to be flat and potentially go down 2/4 basis points twice or 2 times this year. One maybe in June, one maybe in late fall, winter. That all depends on inflation. Those latest reports are going up. So where is that? The Fed can't ignore that. The Fed can't ignore what's happening in these tariffs and the tariff wars and production already pulling back for manufacturing companies. So it's a lot to weigh in on and a lot to consider, but unless it turns really wrong really fast, it looks to be flat to a slight improvement this year.
All right, Janice Spooner, get back to running that bank, and we'll have you on the James Show again pretty soon. Thanks for your expertise.
Thanks. Take care.
You can find her at gpbankok.com. That's for Great Plains National Bank, gpbankok.com. There was a story that it might have floated around on your social media, and it's it's in the Dallas Morning News and WFAA.com. And I think we even had something about it on WBAP.com. Is that where I saw it first? But it's Xavier Worthy. Sound familiar? Well, if it doesn't, that's all right. He's a local kid who just went to the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's really well known in sports circles around here because he also played for the great Texas Longhorns. Do we clap for that? I don't want to alienate our Aggie audience. Don't be sensitive. I cheer for Aggies too. Hush. That's not What? Oh yeah. Well, look. Okay, fine. Frogs too. I don't have to celebrate every college just because I mentioned one. Ponies, whatever, green. But the article here, it was disappointing to read because I don't know whether or not this guy was guilty when I first read the headlines. But the problem is, if you did this wouldn't be a headline. If Garrett did this wouldn't be a headline. But only because this guy is well known, only because this guy is a big star. He played for the Longhorns and then the Chiefs and was just in the Super Bowl. He gets arrested, and we're told that he is charged with a felony that has to do with domestic violence, something to that effect. I forgot what the legal term is. But as of Saturday evening, the charge has been dismissed/declined. So the thing that's ugly about this is all the folks that rushed to go report this guy got stained. This is going to show up in Google searches for his name. He's going to be attached to this forevermore for something that got dropped, in 24 hours. And that's terrible. That'd be terrible if it happened to you, but it only happened to this guy because he has a name. And so this opens up an interesting conversation on, well, what makes it a headline then? It's not a headline if a regular guy gets in trouble for some undisclosed. It's not like we have pictures or video of him hitting a woman, which would, make it titillating and sensational and kind of explain why. It's just the boring old text. Hey, this guy that you may have heard of that played football? Yeah, well, he got booked, and now everyone's going to associate him with domestic violence. Rightly or wrongly, it's definitely up for grabs because we don't know. We don't know if he really did it or not. Maybe he did. Man, that's not fair. So it's only a news story if it's someone you know. And then let me look at it. Let me show you another little local story here and kind of tie this together. Over the weekend in East Oak Cliff, a 16-year-old was shot and killed. But this isn't going to be a big story. We don't even know the guy's name. We don't know the killer's name. I don't know if the guy's got caught. Will they update us when he's caught? I mean, maybe. It'll probably just be a couple of paragraphs in black and white, no pictures of the crime scene, and no breathless TV reporter standing at the scene doing a live stand-up report. We're not going to follow this like we follow other children that get murdered. And then, 16-year-old, that's a child, okay? I know in a lot of circumstances they don't look or talk or act like children. But think about when Casey Anthony was accused of killing her child. She's back in the news now, right? That was a story that made national news constantly for 2 years. Kaylee Anthony, her daughter, is her life any more important than our neighbor, the 16-year-old that got shot and killed in East Oak Cliff? So why is that story big? Casey Anthony wasn't a famous person like Xavier Worthy. She's not related to anyone. It's not like she's Hunter Biden, the president's son, or anything like that. Why does that story get so much more attention? Well, I mean, like a million times more coverage than the 16-year-old that happened in your backyard. Look at other comparisons. What about George Floyd? Why does his get so much attention? And the most important thing I've noticed in the stories that never seem to get widespread national attention like this one, because this happens almost every day. It's weird that it kind of seems like it should get news coverage. It seems to fit the criteria of what's newsworthy. Like, go back to George Floyd. His death was huge news. Why? Why was his death reported on far more than our 16-year-old neighbor? Well, some people will say that racism is a major issue affecting America, and this racial angle is not just an isolated incident. It's a long string of abuses going all the way back to 1619. No, we can't say that either. Name one story that got half as much reporting as George Floyd. That was a racially motivated homicide where the races were reversed. Does it never happen, or does it just not get the same amount of attention? So you're not really worried about racism in general. You're just worried about racism if it goes in one direction. And I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people who write headlines and pursue these stories and give them flowing coverage, while the 16-year-old that got shot in our own backyard, you don't even know his name yet, but you're not going to block a highway for him. There's going to be no specials about him. There's not going to be murals all over the country about him. So is it the rule that because it was a cop homicide, because the cop killed him? And, cops killing someone that's an interracial killing, ooh, that adds a certain level of spice. That makes it newsworthy. Okay, same thing. Tell me one instance where a story got 1/millionth the coverage of George Floyd that was a racially motivated killing of a white guy, or a racially motivated killing of a white guy by a cop, or just a killing of a white guy by a cop. Anything like that. Name one. Name one big story about a white guy who was unjustly murdered by cops. I mean, There's not none. You struggle to think of it. What, like David Koresh is as close as we get? So it's not the rule that cop homicides are newsworthy on their own. And it's not a rule that cop homicides are only newsworthy if it's an interracial cop homicide. So I submit to you also that it's not only if it's a black guy being killed by a white cop. I submit the case of Robert Fortson. He's the airman, the Air Force active duty military member who was killed unjustly by a white cop in Florida. And it just happened, I think, 2 years ago, maybe. But he was an innocent guy killed by a white cop wrongly. The cop wasn't immediately thrown into the jail and condemned forever for murder. Why isn't that a big news story like George Floyd? And here it is, because it doesn't divide us. It doesn't split us apart. We would all agree on that. White, black, and different. Because it's actually, there's body cam footage of it. You can go look it up. You can go look up the story of Tony Timpa, something that happened over here on Mockingbird over by Love Field. It was a cop who put his knee in the back of a white guy in the little grassy part of in the parking lot, between the parking lot and the curb, or the sidewalk and the curb. And he ended up suffocating to death, just like George Floyd. Didn't make national news. There's body cam footage of that too. Why not? Because it doesn't divide us. The media's pattern here, if you were trying to computer code the algorithm on what makes something a headline and what makes other similar stories not a headline, it just appears the media is intent on highlighting the stories that keep people thinking that this is a racist hellhole of white supremacy or male bigotry or whatever the dishonest talking point is. They're just always seeking to divide. It's a very ugly thing. And you also see it on they omit positive stories as well. They don't just highlight negative stories. They omit positive stories. Has ABC, MSNBC, Jake Tapper, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, any of these people, have you heard anyone praise the appointment of Kash Patel as our first FBI chief of Indian descent or first FBI chief of Hindu descent or whatever? Why not? I thought they love diversity, equity, inclusion, all that good stuff. No? Only if it makes your team look good and the other team look bad? Well, then you're not really interested in that. You're exploiting these existing divisions and strifes and struggles, an ugly part of history. You're exploiting that for political gain. That's what the media headlines are based on. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Coming up next, Laura Reese from the Heritage Foundation on illegal immigration. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.